rewritten version. Hello, I'm Matthew Burchette, and welcome to Behind the Wings. In this episode, we're taking a close look at one of America's most iconic bombers, the B-52 Stratofortress. I know I say this a lot, but seriously, how cool is this? You're about to get a rare insider's view of this legendary aircraft, something not everyone gets to experience. Welcome again to Behind the Wings. As I mentioned, my name's Matthew Burchette, and I'm a curator at Wings Over the Rockies Airspace Museum in beautiful Denver, Colorado. Get ready to explore some of the most iconic aircraft in history, discover fascinating stories of aviation's past, and walk away with a deeper appreciation for the world of aerospace. Trust me, you won't want to miss this. A history of the B-52. The B-52 Stratofortress concept emerged in 1945 when the United States Army Air Forces sought to expand its bomber capabilities. By 1955, the first B-52s were delivered to the 93rd Bomb Wing at Castle Air Force Base in California. Armed with nuclear capability, the B-52 served as America's big stick of diplomacy during the Cold War. Designed to penetrate deep into Soviet territory and strike urban centers and industrial targets with nuclear weapons, B-52s were on constant airborne alert from 1960 to 1968. Fortunately, the B-52 never dropped a nuclear weapon in combat, though it did see extensive action during the Vietnam War. Lessons learned in Vietnam sparked a search for a successor to the venerable B-52. Although the XB-70 Valkyrie and the F-111 Aardvark were initially considered, neither lived up to expectations, and the B-52 continued in service. Even after the introduction of the B-1 Lancer, the B-52 remained a cornerstone of America's nuclear triad. Thanks to continuous upgrades, the final B-52s built in 1965 are still in service today, with plans to keep them flying until at least 2045. Enough talk. Let's go explore the second oldest B-52 Stratofortress in existence. Exploring the B-52 at Wings Over the Rockies. Welcome to this episode of Behind the Wings, where we're featuring the B-52 bomber at Wings Over the Rockies Airspace Museum. If you've ever visited our museum, you've definitely noticed this massive aircraft sitting right out front, but what you may not know are some of its standout features. For example, its wingspan measures an incredible 185 feet, nearly the length of two World War II-era B-17 bombers placed wingtip to wingtip. Its length is also impressive, 159 feet, about 9 feet longer than the B-1 Lancer we have inside the museum. Now, we've got a lot to cover, so let's head inside. We decided to start at the rear and work forward. Right now, we're in the gunner's position of a B-52B. There's something about these old planes. They have a distinct scent. Some of you aircraft enthusiasts know exactly what I'm talking about. It's a kind of vintage, musty aroma. The B-52B was originally equipped with a quadruple 50 caliber machine gun turret with a radar gun sight. As the B-52 evolved, the armament changed to a 20mm cannon, then to a 20mm Gatling gun, and eventually the gunner position was eliminated entirely. Did you know the B-52 is the largest airplane ever credited with an aerial kill? On December 24, 1972, the crew of Diamond Lil shot down a MiG-21 over North Vietnam using the exact same 450 caliber machine guns you see here. You might notice this compartment is pretty cramped, and there's no ejection seat. If the gunner had to bail out, he'd pull a handle that would jettison the entire turret's tail section, forcing him to dive headfirst into the slipstream. Talk about terrifying. As fascinating as this spot is, there's even more to see up front, so let's head toward the cockpit. Moving forward. Through the B-52. While crawling through this B-52, keep in mind, our aircraft is 64 years old. In B-52 circles, there's a saying, "This is your grandfather's B-52, meaning today's pilots might be flying the very same airframe their fathers or grandfathers flew decades ago. That's a legacy unlike any other aircraft in the U.S. arsenal. We've arrived at the navigator's station, known as the Black Hole, because of its cramped and windowless environment. The radar navigator, essentially the bombardier, sat here, with the primary navigator just to the right. Surrounded by instrumentation for special weapons and bomb indicators, the radar navigator relied on a large radar screen to identify targets and determine the perfect moment to drop bombs, often nuclear. Thankfully, no B-52 ever dropped a nuclear weapon in combat. Above us lived the Electronic Warfare Officer, EWO. Let's go check out his station. The EWO station. We've moved up a level to the EWO's compartment. The B-52 was designed to penetrate Soviet airspace, and the Soviets were ready, armed with advanced anti-aircraft artillery and surface-to-air missiles, SAMs. The EWO's job was to counter these threats, employing systems like the ALQ-117 Electronic Warfare Suite to detect, prioritize, and jam enemy radar, helping the aircraft survive and return home safely. Now let's move up front to where the pilot and co-pilot worked their magic. The flight deck. I'm currently sitting in the co-pilot seat with the pilot seat to my left. One thing you'll notice, there are a lot of gauges, switches and throttle levers. The B-52 had 8 engines, so you have 8 throttles and an array of instruments to monitor fuel flow, RPM, exhaust temperature and more. Of course, the essential flight instruments, altitude, airspeed and attitude, are right in front of you, just like in any other aircraft. You might see that some equipment looks a bit rough. In 1998, someone climbed onto a ladder, poured gasoline on the cockpit, and set it on fire in protest of U.S. landmine policy, an odd connection, since the B-52 had little to do with landmines. He was caught, but the damage amounted to about $250,000. Thankfully, our dedicated volunteers restored the aircraft, saving it from the scrapyard. Sitting here, I'm struck by how much original equipment remains. It makes me wonder, what's different between our 64-year-old B-52 and the ones still flying today? To find out, we're heading to Minot Air Force Base in North Dakota, where B-52s are still operational and modernized. At Minot Air Force Base, we've arrived in Minot, North Dakota, famous for its cold winters and home to the 23rd and 69th Bomb Squadrons, which still fly the B-52. We'll speak with the base historian and active crew members and see how today's B-52s compare to the vintage one at our museum. Minot AFB is one of only 2 U.S. bases that operate B-52s, and it's also a major hub for storing nuclear munitions. If it ever seceded, it would rank as the world's 3rd largest nuclear power. The base is home to over 5,000 personnel, with its own grocery stores, neighborhoods, and gyms, a city within a city. Speaking with the historian, Rob Michael, the base historian, explains the legacy of the 5th Bomb Wing, dating back to 1919 at Luke Field in Hawaii. One of their unique historical claims is that they once bombed an erupting volcano to divert lava flows, an odd but memorable chapter in their past. During the Cold War, placing bombers in the northern tier made sense, since the shortest route to the Soviet Union is over the North Pole. Minot welcomed the Air Force, even raising $50,000 in the late 1950s to purchase the land for the base, something you'd be hard-pressed to see today. Inside Dock 8 with the B-52. Now I'm inside Dock 8, a hangar large enough for 2 B-52s to undergo maintenance out of the harsh elements. Captain Arpin, a B-52 pilot, has been flying these giants for 5 years. Compared to our museum's B-52, today's jets sport modernized systems. We'll take a walk around to see the differences. The B-52's 8 TF-33 turbofan engines produce that iconic smoky exhaust due to their older, less efficient design. The aircraft can carry up to 290,000 pounds of fuel, and mid-air refueling is routine. The bomb bay now houses a conventional rotary launcher, allowing the aircraft to employ smart weapons, a significant upgrade from the basic gravity bombs of the past. Although the external structure dates from the 1960s, the internal systems have been heavily upgraded. The tail gunner's position was removed long ago. Today's threats are far beyond the reach of a single gun turret. We'd love to get inside to see the modern cockpit, but maintenance is underway. We'll come back later when Captain Arpin's crew can give us a proper tour. Watching the B-52 in action, I spent some time out on the flight line watching these legendary aircraft take off. It's an incredible sight. Big, somewhat smoky, but impressive for a design that predates your grandfather's flight training. Back in Dock 8, the full B-52 crew is ready to show me around. Inside, the cockpit looks familiar, but with new capabilities. The basic arrangement remains: a pilot, co-pilot, navigator, and EWO. These days, the EWO manages complex threats via advanced electronics. Down in the black hole, the navigators handle everything from precise weapon targeting to verifying that all bombs have dropped from the bay. They even crawl back into the aircraft's interior if needed. No easy task. For many of these aviators, operating in cramped, windowless spaces is second nature. They take pride in their work, ensuring the mission's success and returning safely home. Conclusion: the B-52 Stratofortress is an aviation icon, a timeless aircraft that has spanned generations of flight crews. From exploring one of the oldest B-52s at the wings over the Rockies Museum to seeing active-duty B-52s at Minot AFB and meeting the men and women who maintain and fly them, we've truly gone behind the wings of this legendary bomber.